Cutdown day is on the horizon. August 31st is quickly approaching, and when it arrives, nearly half of the current 90-man roster in Foxboro will be looking for work elsewhere. So, who's made an irrefutable case for inclusion on the initial 53? We dive in here today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Patriots Roundtable Podcast. Alongside Tyler Geis, I'm Eddie Marotta, and today we'll be taking our third shot at predicting New England's 53-man roster to begin the 2026 season. We previously covered this topic after the conclusion of rookie minicamp in mid-May and just before the start of training camp in July, but now have a much clearer picture of the roster standing after 3 weeks of camp, a joint practice, and a preseason game were all etched in the history books. The fog of war is beginning to lift, and the true image of the Patriots 2026 squad is slowly being revealed. Now we return to the cutting board to examine what the early returns of the summer may foreshadow about the team's future roster building plans. Excited for a very different roster projection here today. Tyler, how are we feeling going into our third round of this exercise?
I'm excited. It's kind of a different day. I mean, we're less than 2 weeks away from cutdown day, just a little under 2 weeks away. So this is where things like the margins get narrower and narrower, and I don't even know if narrower is a word, more narrow, going forward and whatnot. I mean, there's a lot of predictable things you and I can kind of talk about, and we'll just kind of brush over them real quick. You know who's going to be QB1 for this team, yada yada yada. There are some there's definitely some areas on this list for me personally, judging by what we've seen out of like offensive and defensive linemen and whatnot after seeing some guys on the field last week that maybe made me shift some things a little bit in terms of depth. But like I said before I got on the air here, you and I got on the air here, that I made my list and then I cross-referenced with a lot of people were saying, and I feel like I got a lot of similarities, but some minor differences to what a lot of other people who are reporting on this stuff, because these are fun things to do. I love kind of playing a GM for a little bit, but it's got to also be a really, really hard job to do, but this is, part of professional football and whatnot. And forgive me, or forgive us, I should say, because I got my phone off camera here. We are kind of currently monitoring if Christian Gonzalez is going to sign his contract. We're, a few days removed from Witherspoon's contract. So who knows what's going to break while we are on the air here? Who knows what's going to break later today or tomorrow? I don't know. There's definitely some notion that before they get started on the joint practices with the Eagles, that this might be done. Or maybe it won't be. I don't know. It'd be crazy if it got past that point. But anyway, focusing on 53-man roster, hyped for this one. Let's go.
Yeah, Gonzalez could be anytime now, so certainly ready to read and react whenever that happens. As far as the 53-man goes, I'm excited for this one because I think that there's the biggest difference that I've had looking back on 1.0 and 2.0 when we did this earlier on. I think I had a lot of different players, and we definitely have a much better idea of where these guys are kind of falling, especially in terms of how the coaching staff is viewing these players, how they're getting reps, how those things are being divided up. I would say for me, the most difficult part of this, and where I think I had the biggest changes, came when we got around player 58, 57, as you're making those last 5-ish cut downs. Really difficult to make some of those decisions. I definitely don't envy the coaching staff that has to make those in real time and have those conversations. That always has to be very difficult for them. But some different roster designations, I definitely kind of pieced things up a little bit differently here for myself than I had previously. So I'm excited to see maybe even where we differ on some of our predictions. We've had some similarities going through this the first couple of times, and I think this is where things can start to branch out a little bit more. So let's dive right in, and this should be hopefully an easy one. We're going to start with quarterbacks, and the Patriots currently have 3 quarterbacks on the roster, same as they did right at the conclusion of the NFL draft in April when they drafted Baron Morton to be the 3rd quarterback, joining, of course, Drake Maye and Tommy DeVito in the room. Tyler, how many of these guys did you keep? Do we still have all 3 of them on the roster?
hot take right here. No, I'm just kidding. But my days of thinking that maybe the Patriots look into a veteran QB3 or QB2 even are over. Maye, DeVito, Morton are definitely the three guys going into the season. Not much to say here out of the gate.
All right, I got one for you. I only have two. I only kept Drake Maye and Tommy DeVito. We're going to start out swinging here. Baron Morton, look, he will absolutely be the emergency third quarterback for this team. At some point in time, he's earned that through this point in camp so far. This was one of my final cuts, and we're starting right out with it. Very difficult, but I think that a lot of these teams, they play a numbers game, especially when they're cutting down initially to 53. This may look different on August 31st than it does on September 9th when the regular season kicks off in Seattle. But when you're trying to designate different players due to their injuries and where they're actually starting, I think that it's going to be a little bit easier with Baron Morton than some of the other players that we're going to talk about later on, where he's going to clear waivers. You can throw him on the practice squad for a little bit. And if and when you actually need to call him up, he is going to be around the building and available. So just to save a spot somewhere else, I think Tommy DeVito has shown enough steadiness as the backup quarterback in New England where they can just realistically keep 2 to start out and eventually bump that to 3. Baron Morton would obviously still be the guy at that point, but I'm only keeping 2 on my roster to start out. Any pushback there?
I mean, look, I've never really necessarily been the biggest Baron Morton guy going into this. I thought there was a lot of other draft. If they were going to draft a quarterback in the 6th or 7th round, I wasn't expecting the Pats to go with him. I mean, there was that kid out of UConn that really intrigued me a little bit. So I see where you're completely coming from here, but I did not think you were going to just go with that out of the gate. Wow, you kept your cards really close to your chest, but we were sitting here talking before you hit record. So no, I completely understand where you're coming from here. No pushback per se. Would love to have some pushback. Maybe I was toying with this a little bit in terms of where we can probably re-up, especially like places on like the defensive line and whatnot, and add another player here. But just interesting move to see what you've. That's pretty interesting, pal.
Yeah, it's a different one. And again, one of my final cut downs. I know they kept a third quarterback on the roster last year. That was DeVito at that point. Again, I think it's more just a show of confidence in what he's done through this point in training camp as the backup quarterback that you can kind of fudge the numbers a little bit and still keep Baron Morton around the building. All right, so we're going to move on to running back now. Tyler, what you got in the backfield?
I of course got our 2 guys, Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson, up at front as your 2 running backs pretty much. And as much as I have loved Lan Larison, I also really like Jam Miller right now. And I think a lot of people are hot on Jam Miller. And look, I currently have Jam Miller going as my RB3 right now. I think he's going to be kind of more pivotal, squeezing between tackles and whatnot. I think the Patriots are going to look for that in an RB3 going into the regular season and whatnot. Look, Lan Larison, I think has a lot of versatility and whatnot in terms of being dished out to catch some passes down the sidelines and whatnot, work well on special teams. But I think the Patriots do want a guy in the trenches as well. Jam Miller really proved that to me against the Colts. Time will tell within a few days' time if how he looks against the Eagles, if they give him that kind of situation again, where he's going to go out there and be the guy, and the game against the Browns as well. So right now I'm hot on Jam Miller. That is subject to change because I do like what Lan Larison has done. And, a few weeks ago, he seemed like that RB3 kind of guy. But the fact that the Patriots went out and said, this is your game, the other night against the Colts, this is your game. Let's see how you do out there. And he responded really well. I think there's an argument to be made here for Jam Miller to be an RB3.
Yeah, I think this is, again, one of the tougher decisions that I had to make with the third running back here. And I'm going to go in a different direction than you again here. And I'm going to stick with Lan Larison over Jam Miller. And I understand the need to have a between the tackles runner and why everybody is all hot on Jam Miller right now because of what he showed in that first preseason game. I'm trying not to put too much stock in that. I feel like it's an annual basis where we see a really involved, really active running back for the Patriots in the preseason, and everybody always puts him on the 53 man, and then he doesn't end up making it. I think for a little bit there last offseason, that was Larison before he got hurt against Washington. This is something that I've returned to a few times, even talking about Travion Henderson last year. I think that there's special value, especially in Josh McDaniel's system, for running backs that have been around for a little while and understand the responsibilities that you have in this offense at the professional level. And when Larison has been out there, he has consistently been the third running back. You saw a lot of movement in that running back room right before that Colts game where you had Terrell Jennings going on IR. You had Miles Montgomery waived with an injury designation, and that kind of opened the door for Hassan Haskins and JaMychal Hasty to both enter the room. And I think with where they were entering that game, it made a lot of sense to have Jam Miller very involved early on. And he certainly made the most of that opportunity as a between the tackles runner. But I don't think that you can undersell the value that is Larison being in this system for an additional year. Yes, he was on IR last year. It sounds a whole heck of a lot like the foot injury that he dealt with that kept him on IR for the season. Was kind of healed up in the latter stages of the regular season. He was out there practicing with the team. So he's had months and months of extended run with this offense. When he's been out on the field through the spring, through the summer, this offseason, he's been the third guy in that rotation. And yes, it wasn't pretty for him between the tackles in the preseason opener, 7 carries, 1 yard, but that's not all he gives you. And it's very important to note that they were playing with third and fourth string interior offensive linemen that are certainly not going to be on this 53-man roster by the time August 31st rolls around. So maybe not the best indication of what he is going to be giving you as a runner in between the tackles there. He still gave you a lot in pass protection. He was a very active receiver out of the backfield. Special teams contributions, especially when you're talking about players 40 through 53 on the roster, are extremely important. And he's giving you all kind of check boxes or check marks in those boxes for additional contributions outside of just being a between the tackles runner. Jam Miller, great performance against the Colts, and I definitely think he's in this conversation. If there was a way to push it to 4, he would ultimately be my selection for that. I think that there is still a chance that he beats out Larison by the time the preseason wraps up, but right now I am still holding firm on my Larison take. Also want to throw in Reggie Gilliam into this conversation. We're not going to do a whole ton on the fullbacks here. This was much more of a conversation earlier on when Jack Westover was still playing fullback. He has since moved back to tight end. Brock Lampy was in the room. He's since been cut. So Reggie Gilliam, the lone body now in the fullback room. Just didn't want to get too far down the line. I know we could have grouped him in with tight ends, but Reggie Gilliam, I think for both of us, and you could chime in on this, is that lone fullback in the backfield, and we don't have any changes there on that one.
No, not at all. A 3-year deal to come in here and do after what we saw him do in Buffalo for his time up there. Just very impressive. I think he's going to be implemented really well into Josh McDaniels' offense. So yeah, I don't think anybody's really gone outside of Gilliam in terms of list 53-man roster projections. And so I don't think there's anything like that here. So yeah, I think he's our guy at that position.
All right, so we move on to wide receiver, and I think this could be an interesting one here with us, Tyler. Who do you have? How many guys do you have as your final wide receiver number here, and who are those?
So let me count. I currently have, I know where I made a mistake. I made a little mistake before we got on the air, and I'm going to fix it right now. Fixed. I currently have A.J. Brown, Romeo Doubs, Mac Hollins, Kyle Williams, Pop Douglas is in there as well. And he's kind of on the bubble for me, but I think he's in a better situation to still be on this team than Kayshon Boutte is with everything that is circling around him. And that's Efton Chisholm. So those are my 6 guys at wide receiver. I did a little miscount. I'll just explain it on the air. I did a little miscount. I had 52 and I'm like, what the heck? Who did I miss? And I did forget about Pop Douglas, but I think Pop Douglas is a valuable asset, just kind of like in sync with a guy like Kyle Williams. Those 2 guys, when they're on the field at the same time, really kind of wow me. Kayshon Boutte, with everything kind of going on with his I don't even want to say with his performance on Thursday night, because I think there is a lot to be said about maybe the Patriots are protecting that trade stock if they are going to move him, especially to maybe a team like the Colts, who they played Thursday night. I get, look, this Booty thing is a hard thing to talk about for me, because I feel like it's 1 week it's one thing and 1 week it's another thing. And I very well could see him being on this team still up until the trade deadline. And like you and I have said, this team is still even better than what it is right now with Booty on this for the remainder of this season in a contract year. So I don't want to say I don't know here, but it does kind of feel like we are maybe looming towards a trade for Booty. I'm curious to see what you have to say, because you're smirking at me right now.
I did things a little different here again, Tyler. I have 7, I have your 6, and I did include Kayshon Boutte on the initial 53-man roster. So that is my 7th receiver. First and foremost, I don't think that this is a long-term thing for the Patriots, but look, they've been rumored to have been traded. Well, really going back 2 years now, rumored to have been on the trade block was Kayshon Boutte, even going all the way through the draft last year in the 2025 NFL draft. But this has been widely known that he's been available for trade going all the way back through March. If you want to go back and take a look at when he made that trade request that we now know about, he's been out there and he's been available for quite some time now. Nothing has materialized yet. And if that's the point right now that we're at, I don't know that anything necessarily changes in the short term before cutdown day. And if that's the case, then Kayshon Boutte is still on this team. And I don't think that you're going to be cutting another player like an Efton Chisholm or a Pop Douglas to make room for him. I think for me, Pop Douglas is very safe on this roster. I think that early in the offseason, we thought Romeo Doubs was going to have a much bigger role in the slot. He's actually had more of his success, especially in recent days, where he started to kind of catch fire for the Patriots in training camp, playing more of that outside the numbers type of role opposite of A.J. Brown. So maybe more of a snap share with Kayshon Boutte on the outside there. And Pop Douglas has really asserted himself as the top slot receiver in this offense now, of course, without Stephon Diggs in the building. So I think Pop Douglas is definitely safe. I think Efton Chisholm is safe as the player behind him to take those reps. We've seen an increased volume for him with the first team offense this summer. This really comes down to, are you going to have Kayshon Boutte here, or are you not going to have him here? Doesn't seem like the Patriots have gotten what they've wanted in terms of trade value for him coming back in return. And I don't know that that necessarily changes between now and August 31st. So is he still on this team by the time the trade deadline rolls around? I'm not so sure about that, but at least for week 1, I think that you have to hold a spot for him on this roster. You may think that's why I went with only 2 quarterbacks. I actually have another little nugget for you a little bit later on when we're talking about the defense that kind of frees up a roster spot for Boutte here. So again, I'm kind of fudging things a little bit here, but we have 7 receivers on my initial 53-man roster projection, 3.0 with Kayshon Boutte still in the building. How you feeling about that one?
Look, I had him on my list till about 5 minutes ago. So the thing is I completely understand. I completely understand what you're talking about. I don't know. There's just not a clear picture for me at this really the last month or so with him, just kind of what I saw on Thursday night. Are they really kind of pulling him back? Because maybe there's a discussion that he is very much going to be somewhere else in a couple weeks, but the flip side of that coin is there's nothing really in the news cycle or any vibe I get that insinuates that they also want to trade him. So I don't know. I completely get what you're saying. But I'd love to see him on this team, basically, is what I'm getting at. I wasn't trying to be spiteful by having him play somewhere else or not making this roster. That wide receiver room is absolutely, it's on fire right now, but it's a blazing inferno, I feel, if Kayshon Boutte is still a Patriot in 2026.
Yeah, we thought that maybe it was the New York Giants. They look like they're getting Malik Neighbors back ready for week 1. Really liked what they've seen from Malachi Fields so far, their draft pick from this past draft. out of Notre Dame. Had a really good camp and going into the preseason now. Thought maybe it was going to be Washington that could have been a trade partner for him as well. They go out and sign Stephon Diggs. So maybe some of those kind of trade partners that you thought were potentially going to be in the running for Kayshon Boutte looking like they're going in other directions. And I don't think that this team is going to just get rid of him for pennies on the dollar when they feel like he can provide some great value to this room. That chemistry with Drake Maye is certainly unquestionable at this point. It feels like every other day Boutte's still out there making a big play. So I don't think that they're just going to get rid of him for the sake of getting rid of him. There needs to be the right deal in place, and they obviously haven't gotten that to this point. All right, so we move on to tight end now. Hopefully this one a little bit more straightforward. Tyler, who you got in your tight end room?
I mean, very, very straightforward. Hunter Henry after that contract extension as well, and hopefully he finishes his career in Foxboro. Tanner Arkin and Eli Raridan, that are the other two guys. I got three guys is what I'm getting. Those are my three guys. Kind of a toss-up who's going to be tight end number two. Some days it just kind of feels like Tanner Arkin is going to fit into that Y tight end situation that we were supposed to see out of a guy like Julian Hill, and keep Eli Raridan in the mix, but keep him in a developmental phase throughout 2026 and whatnot. I mean, yeah, no changes here. You know, CJ Dupree was one player who I thought was going to make a push as a blocking tight end, but that doesn't seem to really kind of seem to be taking shape. So these three guys, I got a lot of confidence right now. Eli Raridan does feel like the guy of the future as a Hunter Henry replacement, or I don't know, maybe Tanner Arkin makes a push towards something like that down the road, but Raridan does kind of feel like that guy. But those are my three.
Yeah, I'm right in line with you here. This is finally, I felt like we got to this point last time we did this and we had all the same players. This is the first time that we really have a group of the same players, unless you count fullback with Reggie Gilliam, and he's uncontested in that room. So I was an early adopter on the Tanner Arkin hype train. Continue to be so. Great to see him getting some starter reps out there. Last Thursday night, he was aligned in the backfield as almost like a fullback type of role. You've seen him on the line of scrimmage as a blocker, and marked improvement from Eli Raridan in the blocking game already. That was something that Mike Vrabel's made a point of over the last couple of days. So great strides being made by him as someone who can be involved in the offense in year one. You were wondering how that room was going to take shape after Julian Hill ended up on season-ending injured reserve earlier on in the spring, and it looks like it's going to be some combination of Eli Raridan and Tanner Arkin now. So good to see them continuing that forward momentum through training camp and into the preseason to give us, or give the Patriots rather, a little bit more stability behind Hunter Henry in that tight end room. All right, so this could be where we have some differences. We're going to start on the offensive line here with offensive tackle. Right now you have 7 offensive tackles on the roster with Marcus Bryant, Will Campbell, Demetrius Crownover, James Hudson III, Caleb Lomu, Lorenz Metz, and Morgan Moses. Tyler, how did this all break down for you? How many did you keep on your initial 53-man roster?
I always forget to split up the positions and whatnot. I always just lump it together as offensive line. But I'll tell you what I got here. I got Will Campbell, Morgan Moses, and I got Marcus Bryant. And I'm keeping – oh, wait, am I? Yeah, I am. I am keeping Demetrius Crownover at that spot right there. Look, I just think those – Will Campbell, I think, is going to take a big step forward. Morgan Moses, I think, is – very key in kind of having that mentor role, and just seeing him kind of not really being at the forefront throughout training camp is an especially promising thing to see with him getting those rest days and whatnot. Look, I'm just hyped for the Will Campbell redemption story and whatnot coming in, as what we've seen with him doing all the workouts he's done with some of the best guys to ever play on the offensive line this season. Been a great storyline to kind of see as things have unfolded. So those are my tackles.
Don't want you to whistle past him here too. Also, Caleb Lomu, I'm assuming, on that list.
Yeah. I had him
there.
Forgive me. I had Caleb Lomu as like tackle and guard. Just want to kind of go through the fact that he has just been so versatile at that, just kind of being moved around the offensive line. Loved what I saw Thursday night about the Colts in the Colts game. Kind of how he was on the field. But Lomu definitely probably the draft stock that we had in him and kind of the reason why we brought him in, I'm kind of starting to see it come to shape. If he can just take reps all season long, first, second, and third team, and be that backup guy, while also probably being a solid rotation into that, I'm loving what I see.
Yeah, so this is actually a spot for me where some roster movement last night for the Patriots definitely changed the numbers. And this was one of the spots where I had to make a decision on what I would do versus what I think the Patriots are going to do. I ended up keeping 4 offensive tackles with obviously your starters, Will Campbell, Morgan Moses, Caleb Lomu right behind them, and Marcus Bryant is my 4th. I've really liked Demetrius Crownover this entire draft process, the lead into it, after they were able to select him with the 196th overall pick. After this guy went into draft season as being a fringe top 100 pick, really reminds me a lot of the way that the Patriots navigated Braden Swinson last year as a 5th round selection. And this would be a player where I would be concerned that he is going to be claimed by another team. If you try and play the game with him, running him through waivers to bring him back to the practice squad, there is definitely some risk there. But one of my last cuts, I just wasn't able to keep Demetrius Crownover around on the 53-man roster. And I would really like to just to safeguard his future in Foxboro. Yes, you have Caleb Lomu there, but as soon as Morgan Moses, whenever this happens, when he walks out the door, you're going to want a little bit more stability behind both your starters when they are Campbell and Lomu. Right now, that feels like, at least in-house, that is Marcus Bryant, last year's 7th round selection, and he continues to take steps forward in his development. He's kind of been that first guy behind the top 3 in that room, so I'm keeping him around for now. And you kind of just got to play the game a little bit with Demetrius Crownover to try and retain him on the practice squad and safeguard his future in Foxboro. Okay, so we move on to the interior of the offensive line, and this is where there was a change on the roster last night, with the signing of veteran guard Greg Van Roten to give you a little bit more depth and stability behind the starters. Tyler, how many interior offensive linemen did you keep when this all broke down for you?
Well, I am going to have Van Roten on this team come time for kickoff. Weren't him and AVT teammates?
In New York with the Jets, yes.
Yeah. So I kind of like
2021, 2022. They were both starters for the Jets in 2021.
Yeah. So I kind of like that simpatico, 2 guys who know each other really well on the offensive line. I see obviously him coming in at depth and whatnot. And you look at a guy like Vera Tucker, who's also made the cut for this part of the offensive line for me as well. Obviously what they're paying him and whatnot, but who knows about potential injuries. We know that contract situation and how that was put together in terms of, he gets, I think, like $250,000 a bonus for like every time he suits up or something. That's motivation for him to stay healthy. But I think we also need a guy right behind him who can kind of swoop in and take that. We could see that out of Van Roten. Excuse me for a second here. In terms of other guard, Mike Onwenu obviously feels like the guy. Really nothing too much to say in terms of critique in him. He really kind of is the heart and soul of the guard situation on that team. Jared Wilson being moved back to center as well, I think is going to be really pivotal because he played that position in college, to my knowledge, I believe. And so I think to have him go back to that, I think we're going to see him thrive a lot more. It feels like home to him, and that's going to work out well long-term for him. I did have Lomu also cycling in at guard as well. I just kind of explained that. Ben Brown, who is injured right now, who suffered an injury just a few days ago, was announced. I currently still on the team, but with this situation coming in with the new signing at Van Roten, sorry. I don't know in terms of long-term if they kind of maybe part ways as things go on around cut day. I don't know the full extent of his injuries and whatnot, if that seems like such a long-term thing, but I kind of started to read the writing on the wall with the player movement last night and the signing. But I don't have him making the cut right now.
No Ben Brown on the team, huh? Okay, so that's a little bit of a difference here from you. I have them keeping 5 interior offensive linemen, and your starters are obviously set with Elijah Vera Tucker at left guard, Jared Wilson at center, and Mike Onwenu at right guard. I do have them keeping Ben Brown, where Ben Brown last year was your super sub along the interior. He played both guard spots. He played center. His more natural position is at center, and Greg Van Roten coming in, I would think would be an upgrade over Ben Brown, certainly. I think that they like having Ben Brown around. He just signed an extension last fall, and if this is something that's not going to keep him out for a prolonged period of time during the regular season, I think that you want somebody behind Jared Wilson that is just solely focused on playing center. So I think that Van Roten gives Ben Brown the flexibility to just play at center like he has previously before he had to really move around because of other injuries on the roster. And I think that you do need that safeguard if you're New England, where you have two guys that are starters in Elijah Vera Tucker and Jared Wilson, albeit in just one career season, but they both missed time due to injuries, AVT a little bit more significantly, but in their careers, that has been a concern so far. So you want that veteran backup to come in. That was something that was lacking on this roster, aside from Ben Brown before now. I think Greg Van Roten can certainly be an upgrade over Ben Brown at the guard spot, being a starter for the last 3 seasons. You had 51 possible games that this guy could have started, and he started all 51 of them. So somebody that you definitely feel good about past the preseason and into the regular season, as somebody that, if needed, can be a spot starter for a specific period of time during the course of the regular season if anything happens to those starters. But I do have 5 keeping Ben Brown around. Obviously, the injury could change that, but doesn't seem like at this point they're concerned about this being something that keeps him out for an extensive period of time during the regular season. Now on to the defensive side of the ball. And Tyler, we're going to start with edge rushers. We're going to move to the exterior of the defensive line. Right now, the Patriots currently have 9 edge rushers on the roster, with Amari Gaynor, Xavier Holmes, Quintavious Hutchins, Gabe Akis, Draymond Jones, Harold Landry III, Jesse Luketa, Elijah Ponder, and Braden Swinson. How many guys did you keep around in this edge rusher room?
I played pretty conservative here and kept with just 4. Draymond Jones, Harold Landry, Gabe Akis, and Elijah Ponder. And this is a tough one for me because I love Braden Swinson, and I have him probably being cut. Oh my God, I feel nervous just kind of saying that stuff because I feel like you have him on your squad. But look, I think they likely need another edge rusher, but nobody really is really emerging from any of the back part of this group besides me, maybe with the exception of Braden Swinson. I don't know. Maybe they bump him down to if they don't cut him, maybe they bump him down to practice squad material. Quintavious Hutchins, Xavier Holmes also look like practice squad material for me. But look, Gabe Akis, we know that situation out of the gate. We know it's very up and down. But I think he responded well to Mike Vrabel challenging him in that preseason game and whatnot. Harold Landry, you and I probably never really expected much out of him in training camp and whatnot due to injury. And obviously he's on the PUP list still. But I think this could all kind of change for me in terms of Swinson. Oh my God, I just feel bad having Swinson out of the situation on this. Depending on what Landry's situation is. Yeah. Depending on what Landry's situation is at the start of the season. But yeah, tough choice for me. I'm kind of just going to monitor the Harold Landry thing going into September and whatnot with Braden Swinson. Because again, great player, but I don't want them to cut him or trade him or anything.
Yeah, so this is actually where I got a little bit funky with my numbers, Tyler, and I'm going to call it 4+1 in the edge rusher room for me on the active roster to start things out. My 4 are Gabe Akis, Draymond Jones, Elijah Ponder, and Braden Swinson, with the caveat that it looks like Harold Landry, for all intents and purposes, is going to start the regular season on the PUP list. Now that we still haven't gotten him back and we're less than 2 weeks away from cutdown day, I think that this is a good way to steal a roster spot or open a roster spot elsewhere where he would have to stay on the PUP list for the first 6 weeks of the regular season. And I know that there's going to be pushback from people on that, but he won't count against the 53-man roster if you work it like that. And I think the play for the Patriots with Harold Landry this entire offseason has always been the long-term gain. So if you have to wait 6 weeks to have him back in the regular season, but that means that he's healthy going into the latter portion of December and into January when you're starting to prep for the playoffs, that's when you want him on the field and making an impact. It doesn't matter much what he's doing in the first 5-6 weeks of the regular season. He looked great the first 5-6 weeks of the regular season last year, and look at what happened to him by the end of the regular season and into the playoffs last year. I think they're going to try and flip that with him this year and just play it very cautious with him to start out the year this year. Hold him on the PUP list. That may open up that roster spot, that additional roster spot that you would need to have Kayshon Boutte hang around for a little while you figure out who the best trade partner is for him early on in the regular season. So Harold Landry starting on PUP. PUP does not count him against the 53-man roster, and it also opens things up elsewhere for a guy like Braden Swinson in the same room, or a guy like Kayshon Boutte while you're still figuring out exactly what his future looks like in Foxboro. Play the long game with Harold Landry. Don't rush him back at some point within the next 2 weeks here. Hold him on PUP for the first 6 weeks of the season and make sure that he's ready to go for the stretch run of the season. Any pushback there?
No, not really, just because of the fact that when I kind of narrow all this down and realized I got Brandon Swinson just not on this team. But the Kayshon Boutte parallel, I think, is really interesting in terms of kind of overlap with the Harold Landry coming in maybe like 6-7 weeks in and whatnot, and then you can maybe trade. And then if Boutte is traded midseason, that does free some space up and whatnot. So I like your point there.
All right, so we move to the interior defensive line, where the Patriots currently also have 9 rostered players with Christian Barmore, Corey Durden, Joshua Farmer, Eric Gregory, Isaiah Eiton, Jeremiah Farms Jr., Casey Rogers, and Leonard Taylor the third, and of course Milton Williams on that list. So Tyler, how did this one all break down for you when all was said and done on your 53-man?
I mean, look, Milton Williams and Christian Barmore are kind of the easy ones to kind of name out of the gate. We know what they're capable of. Milton Williams just a great push for us, especially in that postseason game against the Chargers. Big plays, but there's even more to that than just putting a spotlight on that scenario just to begin with. But I went with Corey Durden as well. I know he kind of feels like the obvious choice to replace Tonga. I think he's poised for a big year and whatnot. I know Mike Vrabel's had his comments, and I know there's a lot of people that kind of compete for that role. And I do have some other names that I'm going to name in just a minute. I got 2 more as well. Look, but he's got an increased snap count expectation. I mean, he's entering this season looking to solidify a long-term contract if things kind of go really well for him. He's got big shoes to fill in Tonga, but I think he's a big enough guy to do it. But I also threw into the mix Joshua Farmer and Eric Gregory going forward. Look, Farmer, I think, has had a good summer. And, he had a sack in the preseason game. These are good things to see in a preseason game. And he looks to be in line for probably a top rotational spot going forward. It's just a matter of who is going to probably be in there and not be in there. Gregory's ability to play the run gives him a nod over guys like Leonard Taylor and Jeremiah Farms, in my opinion. And I think those 2 guys are solid practice squad candidates going forward as well. So I don't think those guys are necessarily going anywhere, just not necessarily a roster spot. But Gregory and Farmer, I think, are good, solid rotational spots behind a guy like Durden, but we shall see.
I really like what you did there. I have one little difference towards the tail end of mine. I did have 6 on my previous, on my roster projection 2.0 the last time that we did this. I did cut that down to 5 this time, and I went a little bit of a different direction towards the tail end. I, of course, have Milton Williams, Christian Barmore to start off. Corey Durden has really asserted himself as that Tonga replacement at nose tackle. Glad that you brought that up. He said a little bit earlier in the week that his goal is to have 5 sacks this season.
Yeah, I read that, yeah.
He had a great playoff run where he had, I think, somewhere around 13 pressures through those 4 games, and he ranked near the top of the NFL in terms of getting pressures. So he's certainly around the quarterback a lot. We'll see if he can finalize some of those plays and get home to finish them off. The 4th defensive tackle that I have here is Joshua Farmer. And number 5 is actually Leonard Taylor. You know, I was a big Eric Gregory guy through the early portion of this process when they were trying to figure out exactly who was going to be that nose tackle. I just think that what we've seen from this Patriots team is that they put a little bit more of a premium on those defensive tackles that can penetrate into the backfield and create pressure on the quarterback and disrupt plays in the backfield. And Leonard Taylor is a little bit more of that type of player for me than an Eric Gregory is. Gregory would be a good run stuffing player, nose tackle-esque type of guy in the center of that defensive line. But if that is going to be Corey Durden's role, I don't know that you need the redundancy there of having 2 of those players. Obviously, he brings a little bit more weight to the table at 320 pounds than a guy like Corey Durden does. But I think that this team just really likes Leonard Taylor. You've seen that from his usage very early on in the preseason game, and then less reps as we got deeper and deeper into action against the Colts there. They seem to really like themselves some Leonard Taylor, so I wanted to find a spot for him on this 53-man roster. But again, Eric Gregory, I'm still a fan of here. I think that he works his way in on the practice squad, and should there be any sort of injuries along the interior of the defensive line, he would be one of those first call-up guys. Not somebody that I think that you need to worry about another team stealing away from you, so definitely keep a player like that in Foxboro a little bit more longer term, but don't have to use a spot for him initially on the 53-man. So we move now to the off-ball linebacker position, where the Patriots currently have 7 rostered off-ball linebackers with KJ Britt, Christian Ellis, Khalil Jacobs, Chad Muma, Nnamdi Obiizor, Robert Spillane, and Riley Wilson. How many guys did you keep at off-ball linebacker, and who are those players, Tyler?
I'm looking at 5 right now. 5th one kind of being on the bubble because it was kind of a toss-up for me. I'll name him in just a minute because I don't think he's necessarily fully. I'll just start with him off the gate. Chad Muma. What's his last name? Muma. Gotcha. Not necessarily big impression. I know he's kind of struggling in the preseason, but I just from personal perspective of just watching this guy bounce around the league. I know this should play nothing into like making a 53-man roster, as he's still looking to secure a spot. Missed some training camp in August 2026 due to undisclosed injury designation. But look, type 1 diabetes management. I just think this guy's really impressive that he's still bouncing around the league and staying healthy and whatnot. But he's kind of on the bubble for me. I'll get to maybe touch on that in a minute. But in terms of guys that look to kind of fill this void really well, obviously Spillane and Ellis are the top ones. Of course, Khalil Jacobs is on this list for me. Look at you. I think you kind of rolled your eyes there. Did the screen just freeze? Look, I don't need to go harp on Jacobs too much here. Everybody knows I've kind of been a fan of his kind of arc with the Patriots this summer. But one person I really kind of want to talk about just for a sec is KJ Britt. You know, I think he had a slow start in just preseason training camp, kind of really had to work his way back up as we saw. You know, he's really kind of fallen down the depth chart as Jacobs was kind of moving up the depth chart. But I thought he had a great defensive outing, forced a fumble after chasing down Colts quarterback Richardson in that game. So I'm kind of happy with where he's at right now. Looks like a solid, 4th or 5th kind of linebacker rotational spot. Gives that room a lot of depth. I'm kind of high on Britt right now. So yeah.
So I was toying with the idea of going with just 4 off-ball linebackers. I did also end up having 5 off-ball linebackers, and it's all the same guys that you just mentioned: Robert Spillane, Christian Ellis. Chad Muma, to me, would actually be that Jack Gibbons type replacement from what we've seen through this point in training camp. He looks to be that like 3rd or 1st rotational off-ball linebacker when either Spillane or Ellis are off the field. Muma will be on. He's had a couple of stints wearing the green dot helmet, calling out the defensive signals for the Patriots this offseason. So I think that his spot on the roster is very secure. I did have KJ Britt and your guy Khalil Jacobs rounding out the off-ball linebacker room, and I actually had them flipped a little bit. I think Khalil Jacobs ends up being the 4th off-ball linebacker for this team, and the guy that I was really having a tough time whether or not to put him on the roster was actually KJ Britt. rather than Khalil Jacobs. I think Khalil Jacobs is a little bit more safe. I think that they really like what they've seen from him, and the added benefit of having special teams contributions from a young player like that will certainly help his case to make the roster. KJ Britt, I think, has done enough to show that he belongs on this team, though, and that's why I wanted to include him. I was a little bit surprised to see him actually starting over Khalil Jacobs in the first preseason game, and obviously he did make the most of that opportunity. As you mentioned, the forced fumble against Indianapolis last Thursday night. So 5 off-ball linebackers for me there. And we now move on to the cornerback room, which I'm excited to see how this one breaks down for you, Tyler, because I think this is another one of those positions where I did something a little bit different than I've done in the past, and a little bit interesting here with the corners. Who you got in your corner room?
A couple of the obvious ones. Christian Gonzalez, as I sit here and hit refresh on Twitter and whatnot. And for the record, I still have nothing on a Gonzalez extension, if anybody's wondering. At least unless anybody watching this right now. Well, I mean, there'll be probably a slight delay by the time this airs. Carlton Davis, Marcus Jones, Charles Woods. And I really want to focus on these back 2 guys with Vildor, Kindle Vildor, and Karen Prunty. Vildor, look, had himself kind of a slow, tough start to camp. But as kind of an NFL journeyman, I think even after a bad kind of start and such, he really kind of needs to catch his footing. And when he does, I think he thrives. And I think he's going to be a great rotational cornerback in the mix and whatnot, and be there late in the season if injuries do arise for your guys up front, like Davis, Jones, Gonzalez as well. And look, got an interception. And I know it doesn't really go on the books because it's an exhibition bout, but the fact that, he got the interception for the first one of the season, that still just says a lot. I think, I think he's just a skilled guy, can play zone, can play man really, really well, has a lot he can kind of trickle down to a young guy like Prunty. And Prunty has just kind of made headlines off the fact that he's going after the top dog on the team like Christian Gonzalez and picking his brain, which is something that always ruffles the feathers of coworkers or teammates and whatnot. But if you are that guy, you need to go talk to that guy. And Gonzalez is that guy right now. And I'm not saying Karen Prunty is going to become the highest cornerback in 4 or 5 seasons. You never know. But the fact that he knows who his teammates are and who he's aligning himself with, and he's in the same room with, and he's going to go pick his brain. And that's going to probably do him really well down the road. Definitely a developmental year for him. But I think, next season, 2 seasons from now, I think he's going to be a pivotal part of this secondary going forward.
Yeah, big difference for me on this one. This is where, I said that I limited my interior defensive lineman this time. I went with 5 instead of 6. This is the room where I added that extra player to, and I actually have 6 corners in this room. I think the first 3 are very easy to predict. You have Christian Gonzalez, you have Carlton Davis, and Marcus Jones as that elite trio of corners there, one of the best in the NFL. Behind them, I also have Karen Prunty as well. This is where things get a little bit different between the two of us, though. After that, I have Charles Woods and Channing Canada making the roster.
He was on my bubble. He was on my
yeah,
bubble.
So the harder decision here actually for me was between Charles Woods and Kindle Vildor. Both of them outside corners, and I think that's what you really have a lot of in that Patriots defensive back room are these outside the numbers boundary cornerbacks. It just has maintained the entire time through training camp, through the early portion of the regular season. When Charles Woods has been able to be on the field, he has been the first guy up behind either Gonzalez or Carlton Davis. When either of them haven't been on the field, it seems like the Patriots really trust Charles Woods as that first rotational boundary corner behind those 2 players. So I think that maintains going into the regular season. And I really like the versatility that I've seen from Channing Canada and used in a couple of different ways. We have seen him on the outside as a boundary corner. Pretty much exclusively, though, in the preseason opener, he was the slot corner. And that's not a position that the Patriots have very much behind Marcus Jones for. And he also took snaps as a kick returner. The opening kickoff of the game, you had Channing Canada catching that one for a fair catch. So you get some special teams versatility, returning kicks, on kick coverage, punt coverage, slot corner. I think that he's doing a lot. He also led the team in tackles with 8 on Thursday night against the Colts, and just a player with a little bit of a different skill set and makeup than a lot of the other corners in that room right now. So I think that there could be a sneaky spot for Channing Canada as another undrafted rookie free agent to make this roster. That's now 3 for me that I have making this team. And again, one of the tougher decisions to make, extending that out from 5 to 6 and still not keeping Kindle Vildor on the roster. Of course, really like what we've seen from him so far through training camp, and the interception on Thursday night definitely helps his case towards a roster spot, but he's one of those last players on the outside looking in for me there. So major differences for us in the corner room. Tyler, any pushback on that end? A surprise with Channing Canada there. How you feeling about that one on my end, at least?
No, not really. And for starters, Channing Canada sounds like a great professional wrestler name. But yeah, he was on my bubble. He's got, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a practice squad candidate as well. There doesn't seem like a real need to kind of want to cut him or trade or send him anywhere else and whatnot. So I'd be excited to see kind of like down the road in the next couple of weeks and into the regular season, what sort of injuries kind of play up. Because I really was impressed with what I saw out of him as well. So again, yeah, I coin flip for me on him.
Yeah, if not Canada, then I would go Vildor. I think they're very close on the bubble there. But for me, just with the position versatility, special teams contributions, that's why I lean Canada right now, but that could certainly change over the next couple of weeks. All right, and on the defensive side of the ball, not last but not least, we have the safeties, currently 8 in the room with Mike Brown, Eric Butler, Kevin Byard III, Peter Manuma, Del Pettis, John Saunders Jr., Brendan Schooler, who remains on NFI, and Craig Woodson. How many safeties you have, and what does that room look like for you when things all break down to 53?
I'm going with 5 again here with Byard, Woodson, Pettis, John Saunders Jr. I did keep Schooler just because he just feels like a Patriot to me. I think you and I have talked about him being the second coming of Matthew Slater in terms of, Schooler not really being the greatest defensive safety in the NFL per se, but Matthew Slater was not necessarily, if you saw him playing wide receiver and whatnot, you knew the Patriots offense was kind of in trouble. The thing is he's just such an effect on special teams, a powerful effect on special teams. I mean, we'll see how things kind of unfold in the coming weeks in terms of his situation. Byard really is at the forefront of this room right now as a veteran, as a guy who's still playing very elite. I mean, nothing more we can say about that. A Mike Vrabel guy through and through. I know he's on a 1-year deal, but we could see how that thing, kind of propels going forward. Maybe a year-to-year situation. Saunders, to me, is just in the right place at the right time. I think he's got great instincts on the field. I think he's another great rotational spot. Del Pettis, great game. Fumble recovery against the Colts after Farms punched the ball out, which prevented a touchdown. He finished, 4 tackles alongside the fumble recovery in that game. I think he just made a really solid impression going forward. I've kind of ignored the guy most of preseason, most of training camp, but I felt like he just kind of made the cut and nudged up there a little bit for me. So he makes it for me.
Yeah, I have the same 5 as you, and a difference for me on this one from the last time that we did this was initially through the early portion of the summer, it looked like Mike Brown was going to be that 5th guy in the group there, a 3rd rotational safety off the bench, and John Saunders has just continued to stack day after day after day at camp. He had an interception on Riley Leonard in the joint practice that they had with Indianapolis last week. Followed that up with an interception in the game. Del Pettis has continued to forward momentum through the last really 4 or 5 games of the regular season last year when he started to see his snap share on the defensive side of the football increase week over week. Obviously, that dipped down a little bit more in the playoffs, but Del Pettis certainly has a place on this roster. I think that it is kind of worth monitoring with Brendan Schooler at this point.
Yeah.
He's obviously here if he's healthy and ready to go as a core special teamer, was the special teams captain for the team last year, but has stayed on the NFI list for quite an extensive period of time now. heading into the final couple weeks before cutdown day here. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Unlike Pup, NFI guys are going to count against the final 53-man roster, so we'll have to keep a closer eye on Brendan Schooler in the weeks to come. But if he's healthy and ready to go, he certainly figures to play in as a special teamer on the roster. And that transitions us to our last little section here with the specialists on the Patriots roster. Right now, just 3 of them, with Julian Ashby at long snapper, Andy Borogalis at kicker, and Bryce Behringer at punter. Any changes, any additional competition coming into the room here for you, Tyler, or is this pretty much cut and dry with where we're at with this roster right now?
Pretty much cut and dry, but let's just acknowledge the fact that Borogalis had a not so great game against the Colts, and that definitely put a lot of pressure on him in the last couple of days. You and I talked about maybe he's got to shake off the rust. He's missed some stuff. He missed some, pivotal kicks last season and whatnot. And I was, just thinking about Mike Vrabel's comments and whatnot. I think, a lot of people always take Vrabel's comments when he singles out a player. He does it perfectly, by the way. I mean, to go back and look at, just to kind of go back and look at how other coaches kind of critique their players publicly, there's always kind of pushback and there's flack. Oh, a coach shouldn't be doing that to the press. Vrabel does it perfectly, where it's slightly snarky. It's like 10% snarky, 90% I want this guy to do better. And I think he said the right things. And look, we're going to see how he kind of unveils himself, in the coming preseason matchups. But I was talking with a coworker about this the other day, and it's like, look, there's 32 NFL teams. Most teams got one kicker. If that kicker shows any sort of regression, time to put some pressure on him. But I think they're not necessarily going to make any quick, drastic moves. Let's give it a week. If this is still not really making any progress, then the Patriots are going to do what the Patriots need to do in terms of their kicker situation. But I have a lot of faith in the guy, and I think pretty much all these guys, I would say. I know the Patriots quickly brought back, Nico Lalos there for long snapper, and then I think immediately waived him like a day later or something. I don't know if my notes here are correct. Yep. But I think this is pretty cut and dry. These are 3 guys. If we get into the regular season and come time for a draft or a trade deadline, there needs to be an adjustments made at the kicker. That is something we've seen the Patriots do in the past before, kind of after the Steven Gostowski era and prior to where we're at right now. But yeah, I don't think you keep an extra person as a backup here. You just kind of wait for things to take shape.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting to look at this position group because heading into training camp, it felt like the one player that we thought was actually going to get some competition to push for the job was Bryce Behringer. And it seems like at this point now, he's the one that has the greatest job security. You've seen Nico Lalos coming in and out of the building a couple of times, and maybe that ship has finally sailed, and Julian Ashby is the guy at long snapper as they expected him to be. It felt like when they signed Lalos again for the preseason opener, that was just because Julian Ashby couldn't go. He was not active on game night there. So you bring in a guy to snap the football, and you saw the side effects of having one piece of that 3-part operation swapped out. It felt like at least one of the or 2 of those snaps was a little bit high from Lalos that night, and almost immediately he's right out the door, and Ashby is back in the lineup. It feels like Borogalis may be trending towards having some competition, although the pennants that he's had over the last couple of days at practice in the days since his 2-for-5 showing in the preseason opener have been all on the skinny goalposts at the practice fields at Gillette Stadium, and he has been performing very well on those skinny goalposts. He went 6 of 6 the first day, 3 of 5 yesterday, but it felt like those couple of misses were very close, and had that been on regulation size goalposts, they would have both been makes. So a much better showing from Andy Borogalis over the last couple of days. Feels like he is very much responding to the challenge that Mike Vrabel presented him after the preseason opener. All right, Tyler, that makes it through all the way through 53 guys. We got through 90. We cut it all the way down to 53. Any final closing thoughts here after going through both of our 53-man rosters?
I just love what you did with QBs. Just dropping Morton or dropping him down to the practice squad. I don't know. If I were to kind of double back and see some things, I'm sure I could, maybe readjust something with the Keyshawn Boutte situation and whatnot. Right here on the air, this is why I'm bad at job interviews. I usually have a follow-up question after the fact. But no, like I think this has just been a really fun process and whatnot. And if we can, if we can squeeze it in probably right before cutdown day with an episode, we will. But I don't know. It's crazy to think of some of these guys probably not having a job in a couple of weeks, or just not being on the Patriots in a couple of weeks and whatnot. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely a long way to go to get all the way down from 90 to 53, and that is coming up very quickly. You had that really short turnaround after the Browns game on August 27th to get to cut down on August 31st. So that weekend is going to be fast and furious with the roster moves. Excited to see how it all plays out. All right, guys, that is going to just about do it for us here on the Patriots Roundtable Podcast. If this is your first touch point with us, we'd like to thank you for being here and for staying all the way until the end. For more from us on the Patriots, be sure to head over to the Patriots Roundtable website at roundtable.io. And if you're enjoying what we do with the show on a weekly basis, the best way you could possibly support us is by joining as a member on the Roundtable website. It's fast, it's easy, and it's completely free. And your membership allows you to join the discussion directly with us. We're trying to build a great community of sports fans over on the site, and your membership would help greatly with that. So head over to roundtable.io by using the link in the description below and tell us what you think. Who ends up on the Patriots' initial 53-man roster to start the 2026 regular season? Let us know in that comment section below or over on the community boards on the Roundtable website. We look forward to seeing you there. Alongside Tyler Geis, I'm Eddie Marotta. This has been our Roster Predictions 3.0 here on the Patriots Roundtable Podcast, and we are signing off until next time.